Oh, hey, sorry I wasn't paying attention. Take care, guys. Have thanks for watching me. We'll see. This might be a little too spicy, or yeah, so I'm gonna transfer over to something. You guys want music? The part of the problem I've been using the erase, this blender quite often now instead of using eraser. I feel like erasing your lines kind of makes you have to do the process from scratch, which is fine if you've really screwed up. But if you're just looking to kind of refine and you don't want to refine everything, I think it's a lot faster to do this. Me? I don't know. Not much. I had a bit of a slow day today.
Player characters, and as payment, they get to keep any loot they find, and they get to earn his gratitude. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Gratitude? Isn't that a lot like paying us with exposure? Could you just maybe refresh my memory as to what the conversion rate between gratitude and gold pieces is? Now, the Count isn't a total cheapskate. He can be talked into giving...
Yeah, probably. I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts about all this. It sucks because I feel like I should be a lot better than I am. I think I have serious learning disabilities, considering the amount of time I sunk into art. And I still have like a lot of... I mean, I know I have learning disabilities. I was tested for it, but... I still want to improve, and I still think about art quite a lot.
Such as land for a fighter to build his keep upon, or land for a cleric to build a temple, or a place where a magic user can set up their own little place. Or he can offer his daughter or son's hand in marriage to one of the PCs. No matter what it is, it needs to be something that money can't easily buy. This needs to be a reward worthy of someone of noble stature who's going to be hiring the PCs. Now, once the player characters have agreed to the job, he's going to bring them into a meeting room where over 30 people, guards and merchants, are all waiting, and they're probably a bit pissed off at this time because evidently they've just been waiting all day as the Count has been going through different groups and interviews like that until finally he chose the PCs and decided to
Stop doing that fucking... Why are you doing this? Oh, my thing's gonna die. I gotta charge it.
Player characters are going to hear different rumors about these brigands, some of them true, most of them not. But one rumor that isn't mentioned that you should give them is kind of whispered legends that maybe Lizard King...
1 second, I'm going to...
of old has suddenly returned. Now, before the player characters can learn any more about those legends that they just heard...
Y'all listening to me too much. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
Assassinate the Count with a Flame Strike spell. And you could even have that Flame Strike spell take out whoever just dropped that nice little hint in the player character's ear. Now, this cleric is likely going to escape after the attack, but then you can have the PCs ask the Count specifically about...
I'm just gonna look through my files, so I just don't want to share that data.
And people are just trying to use that name to instill fear, or maybe use his name as a rallying point for people. But right now, how it shows up in the adventure is that the Count is only going to mention this to the PCs if they use magic to compel him, which just is weird, and it seems like a huge wasted opportunity for foreshadowing. After all, it is only a rumor, one of many rumors that the player character should be getting at the beginning. But because of the big reveal that it really is the Lizard King Sakatha, you should start laying the groundwork down for that big reveal early.
Yeah, I think this is... Nothing is... There's no porn here.
Foreshadowing for it, the player characters are not going to care.
You think this is okay?
Once you do the big reveal. Now, the Overland Sakata is that he is watching along the way here, all of which I like. However, 3 of them, the refugees, the stragglers, and the clerics, can all add story detail to the plot. So I suggest that Dungeon Masters leave these encounters up to the chance of dice rolls, but make them definitely planned encounters along the road. One encounter they'll definitely have is once they stop at the Robin's Breast Inn. Now, if they don't stop at the inn for whatever reason, just simply move the encounter to either Waycombe at the end or somewhere along the road with the caravan of refugees. But the player characters are going to meet this crappy minstrel named Pluck, and Pluck is going to sing them a terrible song. Jack?
Can't believe you really want me to do this. You do realize that I have 0 music.
Dungeon masters have to sing this crappy song for their players.
I am doing this. Sakatha once was the great lizard king, said to have power stored in a ring o'er swamplands and plains.
One second. Gonna listen to some music that I can't get. My last broadcast, I got dinged a bunch of times for listening to radio, so I gotta listen to randomly generated shit. Honestly, my desires for art are less about wanting to match a person, and really it's to undo my perfectionism and neurotic behavior, and also focusing on traditional art as well. A lot of it just comes down to wanting that I'm not like, oh, I wish I could draw like this. More like, honestly, I wish I could be less perfectionistic. So like specifically, you know, I actually look towards a bunch of artists who kind of have pretty flawed anatomy, because it's hard for me to allow myself to do that. And you know, if you look at my older work, you'll see a lot of it's very stylized. I used to be quite a stylized artist, but I've kind of weeded a lot of that out of me. And that's mostly because I've been trying to correct a bunch of my style papering over just general weaknesses that I should have taken care of. I mean, now it's changed slowly the past few years, especially this last year or so. But it's something I had to really kind of work on. But when it comes to comics, there's just a lot of anxiety. Like, I got to do a Marty comic now, and I'm very much at the mercy of my mood, since I both have bipolar 2 and I have ADHD. So if my mood swing and my learning disability aren't lined up properly, then, you know, something that could have been simple a few days ago or a week ago becomes excruciating. And that's just how it's going to be for me for the rest of my life. I was hoping that I could figure out a way to fix that, but apart from being medicated to help minimize it, it's just kind of always going to be the way I perform, is that I'm just going to be kind of an unreliable artist so far as, you know, how it feels to draw. When art is either completely unchallenging, it's very uninteresting to me, and if it's overly stressful, then it's very aggravating. I've mitigated a lot of that by doing a lot of traditional art now, and the goal of traditional art is to not concern myself with the results or the quality and all that. And I actually really like my sketchbooks. I think I finished 12 sketchbooks this year, so I'm pretty happy with that. I'd like to share them, but it's just like, I don't even want to bother having to scan and look through all those fucking books, to be fair. But I'm very happy with those books, and it's very rare that my own art makes me very happy, so. And it's like, it's kind of a frustrating, because, you know, for some people art becomes kind of like almost you know, performing at a really high level. They become it's almost like what do you call that, there's a word I'm looking for when it's just not inconsequential, but, you know, completely like without any effort, right? And that actually kind of works for some people. You know, they get really good at art because they want to get to that level. Unfortunately for me, it feels like the closer I get, the more skills I acquire, because it becomes more fluid and easy in many ways. That like there's less friction, so there's less like, you know, challenge. It doesn't, and that I used to draw a lot more art enjoyment from the challenge component of it, not the expression part. So when I do my traditional art, the majority of my traditional art is focusing on just not quality, but like trying to explore things in a fun, really low anxiety way. So that's kind of what satisfies that. The problem is that, you know, I've come to a position now that I can draw. Like, I used to not be able to draw all the time, or it was kind of taxing. Now I can draw all the time. The problem is I got to pay rent, and the kind of drawing I want to do that I can do all the time does not pay the bills. It's not anything I can really monetize, and that's on purpose. I specifically spent the last, you know, year and a half cultivating my sketchbook and my free time to be basically not about anything that has to do with the internet or making money. So whenever I hear people talk about like, oh, I want to draw, but, you know, I don't want to draw all the time, I kind of have the opposite problem right now, because I want to draw, and if I could get away with drawing 16 hours a day every day, I would. The problem is the things I want to draw aren't going to put any bread on the table, and I haven't really figured out how to change my business or improve my financial situation to be more in line with how I want to draw. I'm kind of in the middle of a kind of a transitional period where I'm trying to tap into older audience of mine and do commissions and stuff. But ultimately, I'd like to move away from that sort of content and just kind of be left alone to my, because like ideally, if I had a bunch of money, if I had a bunch of, you know, bitcoins floating around, I'd just be in a coffee shop right now doing watercolors or something. So really it comes down to, for me, the annoying part is, you know, I have I've solved the problem of, you know, I do want to draw all the time now. The problem is I just don't have the time to do it in the way that is healthy for me. So I'm kind of trying to remember, these constructions aren't very accurate. I gotta go back to my notes. The problem with you start forgetting how you're supposed to construct things. You really need to you really need to go back to your source material, your reference material, and remind yourself how things should look. This is overworked. Honestly, I hate kind of doing construction so much. I like to draw things that have no purpose. That's just for me, just like all sorts. I mean, if you go on my Discord, everything I post in the Discord is usually stuff. All the paper stuff is stuff for me. But yeah, construction, overly constructing bodies and using like these connection points, the more I think about it, the more I really feel it should be like a last minute option, a way to correct something. But I'd rather draw stuff like this, very loose, and just kind of get it. Because this stuff, I don't know, when I watch a bunch of YouTube videos and they show all this stuff, it's just, I don't know. It's good to know, but it's none of these people teach you exactly how this fits. I think people get caught in this idea that they draw their mannequin first, and then they draw on top of the mannequin. But having to draw a mannequin each time, I don't know. I feel you should really approach art per situation, per mood, especially if you're a moody fellow like me, where you know what the purpose of the model is. The purpose of the drawing and your mood really kind of dictates what method you use. And I'm kind of tired of also, I don't know, I'm really tired of, my compulsion to always ink really cleanly is really worn on me, I think. But I don't know how to do it any different, because I've always liked clean, like competent line art, so it's kind of a weird position to be in. A lot of what I've been doing with my art lately has been just to, you can kind of see I'm doing it here. It's correcting volume issues. by using these corrective lines. Basically, parallel lines and projection lines. These are the projection lines. So, you know, what I like is I really enjoyed when I was doing my closed eye method, which I don't do as much now, and I really should, because it really does help. It really did help me better visualize and not rely so much on what I was putting on the canvas as the kind of, I don't want to say negative feedback loop, but definitely what happens is you kind of tread the same paths over and over if you use what you see. If you're, you know, you draw, you know, if you're so used to drawing and you draw a line, a circle, and then you draw a line, and then you kind of like, you go down these steps that your brain is used to doing, and if you do that, you're just going to get the same results, which for consistency's sake might be good for you. And I think it's worth exploring a way to get a very neutral method to deconstructing that avoids that crosshair, you know, anime construction thing. And I think I've finally achieved that. Sorry, I'm being pretty sloppy. I'm not really paying too much attention. But I think, you know, I think that being able to tap into a man, I said that word. I think being able to tap into like your creative mind space is like my ultimate goal, and I was doing that a lot better around this time last year. And I was doing that because I was doing all my I was just drawing with my eyes closed. I talk about this in my streams, and I've done it less, and I think I just done it less because it feels I don't know, it just feels weird to do it, and it's surprisingly taxing because you have to really engage your mental mind's eye, and it also forces you to make a decision. So that this is the thing, I think, with a lot of art, there's a difference, I think, between artists that are like have a visual thing they want to represent and like basically doodlers. And doodlers are people, I mean, like Kim Jong-il is just a doodler. I'm sorry if that offends anyone, but he's just like a doodler on steroids. He just, I don't particularly think he had like things he wanted to bring to life as much as he just really liked certain subjects and drew them ad infinitum. And he talks about it as well. He just says like, oh, I just draw things that I like. But he wasn't out there trying to like create things from scratch or like deconstruct some ideas or build worlds in a way that was creative. He was very much just like had a collection of things he really liked, and he just kept drawing them over and over until he became masterful in them. But so doodling really does tap a different part of your brain, and it's a lot more, I would say, relaxed. But like, it also tends to put you in that position where a lot of people find themselves, where they're you know, they're always drawing the same thing and they don't feel like they're evolving, and it's because they're allowing the canvas to instruct their drawing. So they'll draw a thing, and then whatever gets put onto that, they build off of that. That's why like I talk about this, is just like sometimes building a box helps. You know, when a lot of these channels, I'm gonna be the guy who shits on all the other art channels, but a lot of these channels, I wish they would spend more time thinking about what they're teaching. because I don't have the reach they do, so, you know, and that's just mostly because I suck at making videos. But a lot of them talk about building boxes, but there's just so many things about this that is beneficial, and one of them is the oh, is it Kim Jong-gi? Sorry, my bad, man. I'm gonna get in trouble. Sorry, not the dictator, but the artist. I apologize to all the Korean watchers. I didn't mean to make your art hero a dictator. Anyway. So the issue is, like, you know, they don't really discuss the finer points of why you'd want to draw. I mean, such a why you'd want to do this. And I mean, one of the many I've reflected on is if you make a box, you know, and especially if you put it at a very weird angle, you're now kind of like forced to capture an idea within that box as a full subject. Okay, when you just doodle and you start with a face, you're not really thinking about all the, like, you know, where their feet are, their legs are, etc., right? It's like you're putting puzzle pieces together one by one by one by one, and that doesn't allow you to train like your visualization or like how to like create a subject or a final piece. But if you just draw a box, right, you're already kind of forced to think about what's in the box as a subject, not as a flat doodle on a white piece of paper. So, you know, learning to draw a box is also functional as a containment in a way that helps you instruct how to think of something as a full subject, not just as a doodle on a page. And then it forces you to start reaching into the darkness of your mind, the blackness, the haze, and be like, oh, boxes are really bad. I need to get better at this. The benefit is I can tell right away what the problem is. I can fix this instantly, but I really like to be able to nail these right off the bat every time. Anyway. Lines aren't even great. I have to pull out the rule. It's not important. This is something I should do on another. Anyway, so when you draw a box, you know, you're kind of just, you don't even have to draw a proper box. You can just draw a silhouette of a box. And then once you do this, now you're like kind of, your mind is more confronted with drawing a subject. And frankly, it gets kind of easier. And it also forces you to not always draw from the same angle, and it helps tap into your visual, your imagination quite a lot easier. It's not, I think it's, people go like, oh, it allows you to make something more 3D, but honestly the box kind of functions in a way of capturing what you're doing as an actual subject and not as a series of little doodly lines. And I think the faster and quicker you are to doing that, the more you can break out of that kind of like same doodle slump where you're always just like anime face, girl head, you know, guy holding weapon, etc. Well, I mean, almost to a detriment. Kim Jong-gi is actually, I don't particularly like his art, but I do like him. I did like him as a personality. I think he was very anti-stress. People would be like, hey, why don't you do animation, or why don't you do comics? And it's like, that's like hard work. And I figured out how to make money not having to do any hard work. That's literally what he would flatly say. And you know, comics is really hard. It is very, animation is really hard. It's high demand. It can be very difficult. And then unless you have skin in the game, or you really feel like you need to communicate an idea, or you're just in an industry and you got to pay the rent, you know, it's best to avoid that shit, because it'll shave years off your life if you're not enjoying that process. But often, you know, I should do my closed eyes drawings, and I don't do them because, not because I can't tap into it, not that I can't get like good results from it. I've gotten to a point, I mean, I haven't even invested that much time into it, but I have invested some time into it. But honestly, it's this fear. I've been feeling a fear lately that I'm not willing to, the discomfort of having to tap into my brain and actually make a decision on what I'm drawing makes part of my brain, like my ADHD brain and my, I don't know, it forces me to have to make a decision on what to draw. And honestly, just making a concrete decision of what I'm going to draw before I draw it is both beneficial, but it also forces me to have to commit, and I just like have like fear of having to commit to something. Like, in general, maybe I don't want to do that, or I don't know. I think your number one priority as an artist is to make it a positive thing for you. That's like should be the only honestly, that should be the only thing that matters. And I think that, you know, obviously if you want to make money or you want to, you know, tell stories, whatever, but honestly, who wants to tell stories being miserable the whole way? I really wish, you know, drawing at a high skill level or a high, like, I have such high anxiety sometimes about, like, I really want it to look a certain way, and then that'll just make the process really painful and not fun. But also, you know, like, I've had a lot of, sorry, I'm all over the place, but I've had a lot of art hang-ups. I've kind of talked to this to some friends where it's like, where someone's style, I don't know if you guys know this kind of like conversation. Maybe you guys were artists when you were younger, in high school or whatever, but you know, someone would draw something and you know, someone would say, oh, that looks a little weird, and then the quote-unquote cop-out would be, oh well, that's just my style. You know, my style is to draw this thing all fucked up. And the more I think about it, the more it's, to me, someone's style is a collection of both good and bad habits. And it is actually very, very much the case. I've created two very well-known styles that have had dozens to hundreds of imitators over the last 20 years. Under two different names. And those styles inherently have a good portion of what makes them unique is that it's a collection of bad habits and bandage solutions for an inability to draw something a specific way. So it's kind of interesting to think about, you know, people get, you know, attached to a certain style, and that style isn't really as intentional as people think it is. In fact, I know they're not intentional, because if you ask that artist to draw not in their style, many, especially in the anime verse, just won't be able to satisfy you at all. They won't be able to do it at all. And don't get me wrong, this isn't a complaint, or I'm not trying to like shit on these people. I'm not trying to shit. I mean, I'm not outside of this observation. I was just making myself the point of it. But it's interesting to think that, you know, what's a person's style is literally a collection of their best traits and their worst traits, and all the little bandage solutions they've figured out over the years, all wrapped into one. And I think it's very rare that a person has the ability to dictate and manage their style completely with full mastery. And quite frankly, and as I've talked about this before, the more I've mastered my ability to draw and, you know, eradicate, you know, remove, you know, certain styles or do multiple styles, the less impact my art's had. Well, I mean, that's just a glaring reminder of my own issues, you know. There's certain habits and repeated ideas that I would use. This part here is very visible in a lot of the copiers. Also, over detail, like here, I can just draw this sort of thing happening. This over exaggeration of limbs. Too much accentuating on the hip, like this sort of thing for the, like these shapes. But like a lot of what made my early furry style popular was because it wasn't too furry. It was kind of a humanoid, kind of goof troop human approach to it. And that made people a lot more comfortable with furry than had it just been straight up furry. Making it like a pretty big gateway for a lot of people. I mean, I think I would really like to be able to do I would like to be able to draw like a grown-up. You know, learn to draw, you know, nice portraiture. I really actually like doing portraiture. I do it pretty fast now. I really enjoy drawing my friends and giving them little postcards of them and it looks like them. I enjoy being able to like draw, you know, a nice background and explore like a world and stuff, world building stuff. And there is definitely like an industry and a world and a way to like make income with that, and there's a place on YouTube for that, but it would involve, you know, and I'm not saying I won't be able to tap that market at some point. I'm just kind of in a precarious moment right now where I don't have the bandwidth to kind of build a new brand. I have to kind of have a lot of balls in the air right now, and I can't fuck any of them up. In fact, speaking of fucking up, these doodles are just not what I should be doing right now. I should be working on my comics, so I'm gonna do that in a second. I would say the amount of people my old furry art made furries, gay, and also trans is probably in the thousands, easily, if not more. And the style I established in the 2008 for what a femboy looks like has persisted to this day and has become the generic grab bag look and appearance, because it wasn't that wasn't what it looked like back in 2007, 2008. So back then, you couldn't even search the term. It didn't really exist as a term you could look up. So, but at this point, the problem with I don't know. The stuff that makes me happy, like honestly, the stuff that I have like low stress drawing, I'll just link the blue sky, you'll see. The stuff that like doesn't give me high anxiety, I feel very satisfied with, you know, and comfort with, and I don't like hate the process in any way. You could just find it here, I'll just link it. I have a short on how to draw Judy on this channel. I mean, you could say for popularizing in the West, yes. But I'm not the progenitor. No, it's not, definitely not the progenitor of it. I'd say a catalyst. Oh, I mean, the body is just, I wouldn't know how to describe it. I mean, I can show you quickly, but it's just about proportionality. Really, you just want to make sure your proportions are right. It's just this nonsense. Sorry, I know it seems stupid, but as long as you get these blocks correct and everything everything should fit in the right spot. And that, you know, so you got your volumes going on. I always find myself doing this as well. I'll do this and then I'll have to merge this down a bit. I tend to draw it a little overly tall. I tend to draw these lines, these bisecting lines, because it really helps keep your eye on the prize as far as where things are going. It's not necessarily needed. It's not a really perfect solution either. has flaws and stuff, but it can work in a pinch. You can maybe add a little segment like that. But it really starts with I'm trying to not draw the leg hidden. I'm trying to make sure I start drawing the actual leg behind the other leg to make sure I'm doing it the right size. Well, thanks for the compliment. It's funny, people just think that's a big poop. But, you know, it's whatever people want it to be, I guess. I didn't even look at references. I was pretty happy. I was gonna look at a reference, but I said like, nah, let's just leave this low stress kind of marker doodling session. I definitely couldn't have done that last year. That's come from basically 2 to 3 hours of sketchbook doodling, 1 to 3 hours of sketchbook doodling a day, on top of all the other art I'm doing. But you know, that's the thing, is people are like, whenever I hear people talk about like, oh, how do I get good, you know, I'll do 2 hours of drawing a day, and I was like, the amount of time, it really isn't drawing. Volume is really not the only thing that matters. Instructed focus drawing, you know, what'll happen if you draw every day is you'll just get very comfortable with your art tools, which is important. Brush control and comfort with your art tools is important, especially if you're able to draw with some finesse without, you know, constantly erasing or worrying about you're drawing it correctly, or, you know, doing the right lines. But if you're just drawing every day, you're not going to get mastery of art. You're going to get mastery of drawing every day, which isn't going to always translate as improvement in anatomy or anything like that. You really do need to do instructed drawing, not just drawing. I think it's very misleading when I watch these channels talk about, oh, just do X a day, and then, you know, well, some they'll be like, don't draw every day, others are like, draw every day, and it's just like, you know, I'm gonna cut to the chase, guys. If you wake up and you want to draw, then you don't have to worry about how often you need to draw a day. You'll just do it. But your job isn't to draw every day. Your job is to find out why you want to draw and make sure and the best way to do that is to make it something you want to do because it's enjoyable and satisfying. So that's your only real concern. Your only real concern isn't how many hours, it's how do I make art a joyful process. At the end. Honestly. And then now with AI here, AI can just do your job. If you're not going to be invested in your job and you have no heart or emotion in it, then just let AI do it. Because they can do your job with no emotion better than you can. And no love. I use Reflector. They're almost always like this. I'm kind of an intense person when I'm thinking. I've always kind of been like this. I just never really comes out. I don't really have a. I find it very difficult for me to be emotionally this available in my comics, which is why a lot of it's just dumb, goofy garbage and pornos. But when it comes to art, I've been just doing this for so long and thinking about it for so many years that, especially like, you know, you spend time with something for as long as you can. It evolves and changes over the years. You know, I think a lot of art. This is just going to be shitting on art YouTube, but a lot of art YouTubes talk about like drawing, you know, how to get into drawing, but very few of them are like how to live with being an artist for 30, 40 years, 50 years. What is it like to draw, you know, for 4 decades? And how do you deal with, you know, different levels of interest and, you know, popularity? I think different people have different problems. My problem is that I'm always very much exploring art and changing my style. It makes it very hard for people to follow me. And then the second I have like a style people know me for, I feel very boxed in. I feel limited in my creativity. And what that does is just minimizes the amount of profitability I can squeeze out of my art. But I don't think I can change that about myself. I really wish I could. But I think that's pretty permanently part of the process for me, is that once things get kind of easy to do in a certain way and I'm being rewarded for it, my mind kind of drifts away from it. And I'm pretty sure that's just the ADHD. And the ADHD is always looking for novelty, challenge, puzzles. I forget what the list is, but there's a pretty good list of what motivates ADHD people. And it's definitely it's not I don't think it's a positive trait, to be honest. I don't think I need to be suffering as much as I am. If I could better just kind of rest on my laurels. But on the other hand, I can't be anyone else but myself, so whatever it is I'm doing is just gonna be the way I am, I guess. And who can tell if I'd make the same art if I didn't have ADHD? God knows I didn't start drawing for any other reason than I was bored in class. The cell phones hadn't been invented yet. So what the fuck else was I gonna do? They're gonna pay attention. Yeah, honestly, if it wasn't for this weird interaction I had with Adam Warren, with his publisher, I'd probably get along with Adam Warren. I don't want to get into that. But I had a brief moment where I was interacting with him, and then, what they fucking called, Dark Horse was like babysitting who he interacts with. So, whatever. But I'd really like to be able to draw just that stuff I showed on Blue Sky, because that stuff, there's no anxiety, you know. Drawing anatomy perfectly and drawing all these anime characters have all very specific, strict rules that I'm having a hard time figuring out how to break without cringing. Sorry, I'm just kind of mindlessly doodling right now, speaking of doodling. This is not a very good thing, but you kind of get the idea. Just picture this shape and then a much smaller shape. Just proportionality, I guess. I'm using this marker. I don't normally use this marker. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I mean, I don't even draw Zootopia style. I draw in like that super stylized version of Zootopia that I developed over a few years. I wouldn't say it's a fair interpretation. I did do some breakdowns I can paste later. They're in my, here, let me see. I'm pretty sure I pasted these breakdowns at some point. Give me a second. Yeah, it's somewhere. I don't know where it is. Okay, take care. I'm gonna do a few faces and then get onto my comics work. Oh, the seed light thing is just essentially I want to make it focus my attention on doing kind of more serious thing in a contained environment. So I'm trying to make like a OSC slash D&D module. Partially because I really do like, I mean, I do a lot of world building. The problem is I just don't have the time or budget, or really, I guess, you know, not to blame ADHD again, but like longevity to commit all the way through these ideas on a larger scale. But my feeling is I can explore a lot of ideas more consistently in shorter bursts if I can just kind of create like D&D supplement material, role-playing supplement material, by taking my ideas and then kind of painting them out in a way where other people can explore them without having to, you know, worry about, you know, making a comic, you know, all the additional labor that takes to communicating that concept. As an ideas person. Lately, I've been trying to re-tackle anime by focusing on drawing Frieren. Mostly because I hate that I never really pulled it off hyper authentically. Not that it's important, I don't think, but from my own perspective, I feel like I never really got it to where I really wanted it. And its elusiveness has been kind of frustrating. But it is a very it's kind of funny because, and this is best really exemplified by the Frieren looking up meme, because there's so many stylistic limitations to anime for it to read as anime, that the fact that making Frieren looking up is like an LOL joke meme really highlights the problem with anime, which is that it has a very rigid set of stylistic rules that if you walk outside of, it breaks. It's quite a fragile form, because drawing a person looking up is actually quite easy. You just look at a person doing it, and then you draw that, and then you're done, and you've completed mission objective completed. It only becomes complicated when you have a very restrictive, small zone of error, or a limited space to move inside of, to retain the appearance of the, oh yeah, that's that style, or that's how that looks. So really, anime is your teachers, by the way, your teachers were right to say don't draw anime. Draw anime after you've learned your anatomy. It's you're starting with an already solved style. An art style is a solved version of art, okay? It's someone who took something that existed in real life and then applied a series of rules and observations and ideas to solve a problem, which is, oh, how do I make this appealing in a certain way? So making this character looking up is difficult because there's already some very limited the amount of play you have is very, very limited. But like, you know, if you ask me to draw a person looking up, it's actually quite easy. If I just apply like actual head rules. Do this. You know, there it is. There's your free run looking up. You know what I mean? Like, oh, not perfect, but better than I could have drawn before. But then, you know, it doesn't look like anime or whatever, right? So the problem isn't how to draw someone looking up. The problem to this thing is how to apply an aesthetic set of rules to an angle that's barely represented in its genre. You know, certain styles solved this long ago with certain characters, like for instance, I always remember there's this drawing of Shinji looking up that was this. And it's just like, that's Shinji, you know. That was one way this was solved. Maybe not too accurate, but you get what I'm saying. It's just like this is an insane drawing that reads as Shinji's head looking up. But it's just literally a spoon, the head of a, you know, it's like a spoon head with a mouth on it. It's shine. So this is not an anatomical solution. This isn't someone who went to look at an anime. This is a graphic design solution to a problem of how to represent. So it's a solved problem, which is how do I make this character looking up but while attaining the style. So when you're looking at anime and you're learning from anime, this is why there's a lot less to be learned and why it's kind of a dead end in the long run, because it's like looking at a bunch of solved crossword puzzles. All right, sure, you see what comes up quite often, what words come up quite often, but if you never sit down and start like actually do a crossword puzzle, your ability to solve crossword puzzles isn't going to improve by just looking at all the solution pages. At some point you're going to have to like sit down and read and then like go through the process yourself from scratch. And I think that's where what happens eventually is if you copy anime and you reference only like stylized art, you get to a point where you feel like you should be a lot better than you are, and you get frustrated because certain things that deviate outside of the predetermined solved versions of the style come in and sneak in and give you a little bit of a wake-up call. like this, just slowly rotated. But like for anime, so I'm not even kind of using the right brush for drawing faces, honestly. I don't like using line brushes anymore. I like drawing pools, so I might just even draw pools. Silhouettes. I think Hide Channel does this, and he's right to do it. To draw like the ocular orbit or like a shadow pool, and then shove your little anime eyes in there after you're done. Because it helps you better visualize proportions. By like blurring the crap out of it. But yeah, like when I draw, I've been trying to like study and improve my ability to draw freerun, and it's just like it's such a small margin of error to sell it, and it feels actually quite limiting and kind of and I don't want it to be limiting. And really the only two ways to make this not limiting is you draw it so much that it's secondhand knowledge to you. But the problem with that is that you're encoding yourself to draw everything that way. If you only draw, you know, freerun forever until you nail the proportions, then like all your drawings look like a freerun drawing, because that's become your second, like, it's like a thoughtless process, which is also why I laugh when I watched freerun, because a lot of the flaws anime has are in that series, because they'll have all these like nice interesting characters and whatever, but then every time they have to like draw an old person, it's like a kid in a wig and a mustache, like a fake mustache on. So it's like, hey, it's me, kid. I was a kid when I first met you with my anime eyes. You know, and then she meets this kid again, and like the only difference is he's got a mustache, he's got a big beard on like this, and he's got a few lines, he looks like this. And it's just, it's bad. It's bad. I'm sorry guys. This is one of the biggest complaints I've had with anime for a long time, is that they do this. You guys can stand it all you want. It's not every show that's like this, but it's one of the bigger complaints I have, where it's like they want to draw an old character, but it's just a young character with like the old Himmel, which was just like, I couldn't believe they just made him like short. Like maybe it was for jokes, but they didn't even give him a nose. They made him like, they covered his nose up. I can't remember, but it was like this. I'm an old man. It's like, this is just a child with a bald wig on and a beard. I mean, it's not the only case. Listen, there was a bunch of characters that became old and they just look like children wearing wigs. The problem with faces is that we're very good at distinguishing faces, because if we couldn't, we wouldn't be able to tell who our parents are. So we immediately know when something's kind of a little bit off. So our zone of like operation seems very limited. especially if we function within like the boundaries of a stylization. But what I've come to better understand is it's not really entirely like that, because the way we see people isn't, we don't recognize people from their eyes, the shape of their eyes or their nose or whatever. We recognize them from shadow pools. And I know this is true because when I draw, where's my tool? When I take photos of my sketchbook, okay, when I take photos of my sketchbook and I'm drawing with like a and I draw with my blobby brush, and I'll draw something like this, okay? If I draw a page of things that look like this, every single one of them my phone will detect as a face. If I draw a detailed anime face with eyes and pupils and stuff, very, very rarely will the face detector see this as a face. But it'll pick up every single one of these like shadow pool things. And I think what we innately see as features, what a person is closer to this than it is to which is why a lot of painters focus on shadow pools like this, learning to nail this stuff down first, because it's fast, especially if you learn to nail this, like, three or four very good examples of this that you can kind of use as a shorthand. Then you can do your portrait art pretty quick, because like now you can lean in on some pre-established knowledge of how light falls on a face. So there's a lot of give when it comes to faces if you're not drawing symbols. If you're not drawing symbols, then it's actually quite lenient. Your mind is quite lenient on what a face is and isn't. And so is your phone, which is why I make the point of bringing up the phone. This is not a personal opinion. This is what your $1 million technology, facial recognition technology says. Says a big just like a puddle. Basically, this is more a face. This is considered more a face on your phone. Actually, I would say your phone will consider this a face way faster than it will consider any amount of anime-itis you throw at it. And I believe we do the same. We don't see faces as much as a series of similar, physical traits that have to do with your, the shape of your eyes, as much as it has to do with the way shadow falls on your face, is how we see you as who you are. So it's a relationship of these puddles of shadow, their distance between each other, where the extent of the whiteness of the lit face, how wide it is, how short it is. No, I mean I can. If this shit could pay the fucking bills, I'd stream every day, guys, but I don't know. I'm just doing this to kind of keep the channel alive. I have a post I need to post, and I need to stop neglecting my channel again. But yeah, like I'm by no means an expert. But this is some of the observations I've made, is that, and I say this as someone who I feel like I've improved a lot in the last year or so, that there's a lot more to be gained for learning shadow pools in the long run. It doesn't directly apply to anime, and it's like I feel like anime is literally its own like niche sub zone to learn from, but I don't believe what you learn from anime can extend out. I do believe learning shadow pools can help you with anime, and can help you with painting, it can help you with inking, it can help you with a lot of things. I don't believe learning anime really solves anything except learning to observe a very strict set of rules in a way that represents that style consistently. You know, in a way, portrait artists have it, people who draw realistic kind of have it easier, because you can, I think you can, if you do painting, traditional painting, it gets easier with time, because learning to paint from this sort of building of volumes of shadow and light, not only does it have longer lasting implications for your art, but I just think it's funner and easier. You're not constantly having to pull back what you're doing into little very small confines. My renewed interest into it now is that I feel like I've improved a lot, to the point where I feel like I can tackle and learn the style in a very neutral way that won't oppress my art. But like this kind of light carving stuff is quite fun, actually, and it's what I'll be doing more of with my acrylic markers coming this year on my own free time. I might force myself to stream that, be more consistent with that. And maybe, you know, I'm just not built, you know, I've been drawing anime and stylized stuff for a long time. You know, I'd say competent at it. But maybe that's just not the path for art joy for me. Maybe that's just like kind of like a mechanical thing I learned to do, and it's a solution I've solved, a problem I've solved. But maybe that's not where I need to go to really enjoy art, because it's been frustrating and it's been challenging, and it's made me want to, like, I think like 2 years or 3 years ago, I'd say 2 years ago, I really wanted to just stop drawing, honestly. And now I probably draw now I draw probably just for me, probably 2 to 3 hours a day, if not more. And then, you know, on top of, you know, doing commissions and this stuff. Honestly, if I could just hop into YouTube every morning, draw 6 hours, and just whatever my fancy strikes me, that would be really a good spot for me to be in. I hope maybe I can get that to that at some point. Not that I'm really owed that, not that there's really any. That would be a very, I would say, a selfish interest of mine. There'd be no real value outside of just my own personal satisfaction, like making comics. It would just be my desire to improve and learn. Yeah, I don't know really what I'm doing. Honestly, I don't really do this method that often, but I've been trying to do more of this sort of thing recently because I find it more, traditionally speaking, especially if we're going to be using acrylic markers, it's going to be what I need to do. Learn to like, because like, you know, I've been doing, I was doing a lot of watercolors and washes. And that's fun in a way, as far as like getting quick and dirty results. You kind of like do it and you're done and that's it, and you kind of have to just let it be what it is. And if it didn't turn out, it kind of just didn't turn out. But my thoughts are this year is I want to look at some of those old watercolors and then go over them with acrylic. Markers, and then do the next step, which is like, can I save these? Can I improve them? Learning to commit to a drawing more and spend more time with one idea. I'm currently not looking at any references. I haven't been this whole time. I do use references quite often when this on my free time, or when I'm having an issue, or I'm not sure, or I'm trying to improve. I think using references is very important, but it's important to do it in a very specific kind of way. The worst way is to just look at it and then reference it and then draw it one for one. I don't believe you'll learn anything from that except how to do it again the next time. Kind of the paper over the problem. It kind of papers over the problem of you not fully understanding. And if you reference that way and you just leave it at that, I actually don't think you get as much out of it as you think you do. At that point, I actually think tracing is better, because tracing will give you the exact proper proportions in a way that you might not be used to drawing. Whereas if you just like referencing how a hand looks, you're not going to draw exactly what you saw. You're going to draw it in a way that you're comfortable with. But if you actually trace a hand, you're going to trace it exactly, and then you're going to be able to actually see how that hand is drawn in a way that you're not innately familiar with. So I actually think the bottom of the tier list, just like one-for-one referencing, isn't anywhere near as optimal. So yeah, well, I mean, you guys saw. So yeah, like, you know, you could have like a face that looks fully like, look at this. This, you know, it's pretty painted looking face. Looks like I know what the fuck I'm doing. Or you can draw an eye and then Control Z. Also, you guys have probably maybe not noticed, I haven't been Control Zing, and that's intentional. I've been working very hard to wean that out of my system, my vocabulary. But you know, you watch me or other people, me a few years ago or people now, it'd look more like this. Be like, you know, like this shit. God, I know I talk about it often, but I cannot fucking stand it. I cannot fucking stand watching an artist Control Z all the time. It's this. I want this to become a quote people use, so I'm going to just repeat it. If your whole drawing is Control Z, then your drawing is made of almost entirely up of bad lines. If you use Control Z consistently for every drawing, that means that 90% of your drawing are all the bad lines, and you just have the benefit of a time machine to keep you from suffering the consequences of those bad lines. I don't want my drawings to be 90% bad lines, bad decisions. I want my drawings to feel whimsical, like, you know, like a expert piano player who's learned their scale so consistently that they can just like, they can wing it on a fucking piano and it looks like effortless, and that's what I want. And Control Z is your worst friend, is your most enabling friend. I think it's a lot more harmful than people really. This is my old way of drawing anime heads, and I'm already suffering the consequences. So I can tell, right? So here, I'll just show you something. This is how I used to draw heads without creating the baseline. So what I need to do now to draw anime heads more consistently is you need to draw everything. See, okay, look, I'll show you. This is so frustrating. All the features go this way, right? So the few rules I started building is that to draw an animated head consistently is you pull a line down from the center of the head. This will intersect with the nose and the center of the mouth, okay? That's your first rule. Secondly, all your features need to be on a line. Okay? You need to pull lines down like this. Okay? Third feature, the sides, the temples of the head. The temples of the head need to all come towards the bottom of the chin. So don't draw a line like here and then just try to build from there. Once you've got that, once you've got all these pieces in line, then you're going to be pretty good. Because then you can draw the ear, you can pull the chin out like this, you can pull something out like this, and then everything will kind of make sense. Not a perfect system, but it's a lot better than what I was doing before, which was to just fucking wing it. This is still a little fucked here. I can taste it. I can see it almost immediately there. Ultimately, the biggest problem I have is I tend to put the chin way too forward. I need to really draw like a line like this. This is the tip of the chin and not nudge it. And it feels very unnatural, and I don't know where I got into that habit. But it's a lot of so if I make a mistake, I've got two solutions. One is to blur it with my blending brush like this. Alright, so then you can see what was underneath, so you're not making the same mistake over and over again. Here's the issue with Control Z. One, you're going to keep making the same mistake over again without having the full context of the image, okay? The gestalt is something I talk about, whereas you want to look at your image as it's completed in a completed way, not as its individual sums of its parts. But you want to see it as a sum of its parts, not as the individual parts. You don't want to get lost in the weeds. So if you're constantly control Zing, you're never going to see the full image, and you're never going to be able to contextualize all your lines, right? The other way is to just use an eraser that's very low opacity. So this is my low opacity eraser, so you can do this. Low opacity eraser I use when I'm actually okay with what I've drawn. I'm just trying to refine it just a smidge. So if I'm like, okay, this is actually, these lines are fine. I don't have a big problem with them, but I need to like add a little bit more detail to them. Right? If I'm fine with them, then I use low opacity eraser. But if I'm like, I made some mistakes that I need to erase, this is like, it really needs to be reworked, then I use the blender. And I leave it messy, or I'll use a low opacity eraser right after. You know, so that so I can try to fix the mistake by seeing my underdrawing, but just enough. I can see my underdrawing just enough to not make the same mistakes. And to correct, because you really need to start understanding how to correct your work to better avoid creating the same problems over and over that Control Z will never help solve for you. Control Z will never give you the full context of your image, because you're building it from you're looking at little tiny puzzle piece, and you put that puzzle piece in, and it's like, oh, this doesn't fit, this doesn't fit, this doesn't fit, but you've never even seen the full image yet, so how can you know, really? Instead, what you're doing is you're making a bunch of small decisions based on a limited idea of what the full image is, and so how could you ever be fully informed on not that being actually the right line? And I actually think this applies even for line art. One of my biggest hurdles to get through, one of my biggest hurdles I have right now is I'm like lowering my obsession with line quality, and some of that just comes with just drawing enough lines that all the lines together look fine, right? That's why I've been doing a lot of hatching. Ideal. One of the problems I have with my faces is that they take up too much space. I mean, it's fine. Like I said, this is my new hobby, is fixing my anime face. Getting some very concrete rules to follow to be consistent from every angle. Anyway, you can just erase it. You really don't want to lean in on your bad so the reason I blur like this is that I can't lean in on my previous bad decisions. Right? If it's just like the original drawing, I'm just going to draw in all the bad decisions again. You really need to like almost obliterate it so you can get to reconstruct it with those rules or those things you learned that says this is how you make this consistent. If enough of the original drawing is there, that you're just going to lean back in on those bad mistakes. but I'd really like to get this solved once and for all. I feel like I've probably got another 6 months to a year before this is never a problem ever again in my entire life. But it's gonna take this whole year to really nail it. I'm gonna have to really buckle down and like hammer this into my thick skull. Because anime doesn't obey anatomical rules. Sometimes the ear is low, you know, sometimes it's stylized in a way that doesn't make sense. Yes. You want to avoid just polishing your turd. You want to kind of get to a point where it's like, this is the thing I want, is generally the shape I want, but the method I'd used gave a bad result. And if you keep allowing that initial bad drawing to shine through, you're going to just keep leaning in on those bad habits. You know? So this head's like, you know, this is more realistic head. It's not as much anime. And I keep correcting the ear because anime has bullshit ears most of the time in the wrong place, but that's because the hair, they have little hair dangles that hide that issue. You know, so it's like figuring out that balance of like, I'm okay with how this looks versus, you know, this is a stylistic choice versus this is a limitation of my style. This is a limitation of my understanding on how this works. And even then, like, there's a way to deconstruct. I was looking at this earlier today. So there's a way to deconstruct it, right? Like, you'll see this quite often. Like, I was looking at some Freerun art. Let's say they're looking down like this, okay? And then the ear will come up here. You know, they'll be like this. And the neck goes behind the jaw. And in a way, like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, oh, that ear should go up more. That doesn't really make sense. Like that the neck stops and then the ear's attached to the jaw, right? So a way to combat that is just to draw the ear and the line and then find out how that jaw is intersecting and then draw that intersection, so you're still grounding it to the neck, because learning it where you're drawing the ear as part of the head is wrong. That's not how that works. The neckline goes behind here and attaches to the, you know, the pit of the neck and all that stuff. So it is learning to always attach the ear to the head and not to the neck is like something I've deprogrammed out of myself. The ear and the neck are better suited as their own component than it is the head and the ear. And even for myself, oh, I'm drawing all over the place. Even for myself, what I've started doing is I don't even draw. I actually force myself to draw, whenever I draw a head, I make sure that it's actually attached by necklines and the clavicle pit and the shoulders. I believe if you're going to draw a head, learn to draw it as a full assembly like this. Always. This is a natural cutoff spot where you can just kind of add clothes, or, you know, you can attach the rest at some other point. But if you're going to learn to draw the head, don't just draw the head. Don't just draw the head and the ears. Don't just draw the head and the ears. You really need to understand how the head interplays with the neck and with its attachment point with the shoulder blades and the clavicles. Yeah, so the issue comes down to the issue comes down to like the issue comes down to when it comes to like anime is like, once again, shitting on other other YouTube channels, but quite often it's like, oh, you want to get good at anime, learn to draw the head, the realistic head. It's like, but no. No, actually, because it doesn't apply. It's a graphic design decision. It's a like the stylistic decisions made with an anime, with the, you know, where the placement of the ear is entirely predicated on stylistic and graphic design decisions, because you're making like here, I'll show you the thing. Whenever you're drawing panty stocking, if ever you're trying to draw panty stocking, all right, you always want to draw this curves and this is flat. Okay, you got the jawline, this curves in, and then you might go like this, sorry, and then this line has to be flat, and then you got the ear. I think that's what I had remembered. But this line, the line that's on this side where the ear is, works better if it's flat, and this line on this side works better if it's rounded. That's like a graphic design decision. That's not an anatomical observation. You're not going to look at, you know, a sculpture of a head and make like that observation. That's because you're contrasting this curve shape with this long shape, and then it looks good. It has an appealing. It makes the ear seem more round, and it contrasts the roundness of the cheek, right? That's not, you're not gonna find that on Michelangelo's David. I don't know, those are furry ears, they don't count. So, sorry, I don't mean to go on a long tangent there. I'm just saying, like, learning to draw a head more consistently, like from reality, is not only going to help you with that case. You're not going to get more out of it. Yeah, like this. Once again, I'm not shitting on it. I mean, obviously, there's a reason why it's compelling and people like it. But let's be very clear. Like, there's no method of constructing a head that will ever like solve that problem. What it boils down to is how to take like real 3D rules and then learn to bake those the rules of anime into that shape so that it's consistent. But that's a much better place to be than to be like not know how to draw a 3D shape, not know how to draw. I'd say learning to draw this sort of thing consistently, especially like a simplified anime head, honestly, it'll be your good middle ground. It'll be boring as hell and you might hate it. But there's some pretty decent 3D, you know, anime head approximations. But, and I don't mean just like a little bit, I mean like perfectly. Like you could draw it, you know, a few versions of this, like a chibified version, and then you can lay it on top of your reference and it will always line up perfectly. And I think if you can nail like 9 of those angles, and your only goal is to draw anime, you can get away with a lot. And you might be very satisfied with that, which I wouldn't take that away from anyone who that's their only goal is to just draw, you know, draw anime faces for shits and giggles or whatever reason. But it's just always a nightmare. Like I look at this and it's just, faces are often like, especially anime faces, they're just kind of floating on a shovel. Like honestly, if you just draw like a spade, all right, you drew this, you draw it, you can dig up your garden with this, you know, and you can just kind of like draw it over here. As soon as you draw this, it's like, oh, there's my anime. You know what I mean? Like, and you can just move this wherever you want. You can draw it, you know, looking down. Like, there's no, this is makes no fucking logical sense. This is not anatomically driven at all. This is it's all graphic design bullshit. Geometric proportionality. So like learning to draw the facial features in isolation works out in the long run for anime, I guess, in many ways, because the silhouette of the jawline can just be is so flexible. Honestly, when it comes down to anime, the more important component isn't the head, it's as much as the amount of space. The more that there's like breathing room, equal breathing room around the head, like this like gap, quite often is what makes a style aesthetic. You know, if things kind of fit inside that space without kind of infringing on that space, because quite often I find that when I look at anime, that's a pretty consistent rule, is that there's all this like breathing room around the jawline. Right. So, you know, how do you contend with the fact that you got like basically a bullshit, you know, bullshit art style? I mean that in the nicest of ways. So the best way to do that, I mean, I don't know. That's why I'm kind of dealing with it right now. I'm retackling an old demon of mine. My feeling is it's been about working with blobs. So my previous stream, I think I talked about this, but the idea I have right now is to just tackle it by learning to blob in proportion where things should be. This includes like the jawline, the ear, and then once I've kind of I've learned to put these in the right spot, I feel like the rest will kind of fall into. Once I can learn this shorthand, I know I can draw features decently enough. So I know I can kind of like I can put all the places in the right spot. And it's also faster to do this than to draw like, you know, all these lines, all the shapes. And it's more conducive to the graphic design style, because instead of focusing on trying to take a 3D shape and bringing it into a 2D style, instead what I'm doing is I'm trying to learn proportional relationships of features and then playing within those confines and trying to bring some measure of shape and volume to that, you know. So like learning that, you know, Bulma, for instance, might be like Bulma might be like this sort of shape. Learning this, I think, might be much better and faster and more have more value than learning, you know, doing all this construction stuff. Oh, and Akira's tiny face. Let's try Akira's tiny face. Sorry, Tetsuo's or Kanye does. I've drawn them before, so I know this is how they look. But I even think when it comes down to like learning, I think your brain is more primed to learn. This kind of rounds back to what I was talking about shadow shapes. I think our brains are primed to remember little pools of shadow and of like proportional distribution like that, more so than we are to these like lines and construction methods. I think that ultimately it's a dead end. It doesn't look like this, but they sort of have this like giant. I don't know why it has a baby face, but you know. No, that's the correct assessment. It's not, you're not, their faces look good in certain angles and the silhouette of the face looks good in certain angles, and there's optimal places, there's optimal ways to show them. And an anime head isn't about moving a 3D shape in perfect 3D like, it's not about moving a shape perfectly in 3D. And that's why I think the suggestion people make of like learning, you know, a 3D head is wrong. I think the right decision is to learn those optimal 3D heads, but that are in the optimal positions, so that you have some basis of like reality attached to it. There's like you can put a shadow on it, you can look at it later, add lighting to it, and like build off of those shapes. But and then the faces themselves work within those boundaries. You know, so you got like the head going, you know, the 3/4 head from up, the 3/4 head from down, and there's like some play as to where you can put those features. You can put them over here a little bit, maybe over, maybe a little up down, a little down here. I think that's definitely the right approach. And when you get really good at the style, what you ultimately end up doing is you're trying to keep consistent, and you're presenting a graphic design style, not an entirely realism based thing. So I think that's the right choice, because there's literally, you know, there's confines. There's confines to play around in. The problem is that if you're trying to learn that as an artist, well, you're learning bad habits. Right away, you're learning things that make no sense. Like a face looks okay here and it looks okay here, and you're not explained like, well, you can do that because there's some play with this, but you're trying to, like I said from the start, anime is an already solved drawing. Someone took reality and said, how do I make this stylized and appealing? There's a lot that's missing to you. There's a lot that's hidden from you that can only be observed by either doing it a lot or looking at it a lot and understanding all those components and how they interplay. But yeah, and it's difficult because like I've gotten to a point where I really feel like I've gotten that normal faces looking pretty good. Not, you know, the best, and there's still a lot of flaws. But trying to apply those rules to anime is not an easy process. And I think if someone's thinking of doing that and they're here right now, I'd say I don't know what the solution is. I'm still working on it. But it's definitely more along the lines of this, and this is what I've been working on, is creating a set of proportional rules. So, you know, if I have an eye here and an eye here, you know, the eyebrows will be twice as high. Sorry, the eyebrows should be. The mouth should be twice as high as where the eyebrows are. And then another one of these segments for the chin, and two of these segments for the top of the head. So that's like a sort of, I would say, like a hybrid approach. You're creating kind of like a 3D guide, but with style rules. So here, so you got 1, 2. So this is just this twice. Once here, and then same with this. This is going to be twice. That's going to be the top of your head. And then you kind of fit everything inside of this. This is where the teeth are, so the lips can go below that. The top of the head is. And then the other rule I have is I draw a line from the top of the eyebrow down to the nose to the middle of the lip. And that defines where the jaw is. And then I build, and then the temples or the sides of the heads have to converge to some extent, converge. And then once I've got all these pieces in play, then I can kind of, once all these pieces are done, then I can, like, you know, free ball the rest. I can build within those like restrictions. And that's how you kind of build as a consistent style. So that's got some, you know, relevance to logic and isn't just entirely bullshittery. Yeah, and that's why you get the Freerin head. This is the point I was making. The Freerin is the Freerin looking up meme is a perfect kind of example of the limitations anime inherently has, which is it has a narrow set of guidelines for it to be appealing. And once you start deviating from those guidelines, you're disciplined for it, and you're basically. And why that's bad for new artists is that new artists are quickly not rewarded. What's the opposite? Not chastised. whatever the opposite reward is. They're essentially, as soon as they start deviating from its natural form that looks good, they're taught that that's wrong. Don't do that, and that's going to be an extreme limiting factor to your art. Whereas if you're learning from a real person, well, if they look up and it looks like this, it's not wrong. That's just how it looks. And now you've learned something a little bit different. A person isn't wrong, okay? A person can never be photographed wrong. They can just look weird, but they're not. It's not wrong for them to. It's not incorrect for them to look weird. It's always going to be accurate to reality for a photographed person to look. How they look in any angle. Whereas anime has a narrow set of rules that allow it to only function effectively within those rules. And it's not to say people haven't drawn a bunch of like anime-ish style faces and posted them on Twitter to be like, see, you can do it. And it's like, well, from the world I come from, if you're old enough, there's a time when an anime character just never looked up because no one had solved that yet, and there hadn't been an accepted way to do it that was like accepted by the fandom in general. The usual solution, like I said, was to just do this. You know, the usual solution is to do the spoon. So people being like little smart alecks, like, oh, it's not hard. The question isn't drawing freehand from bottom up is hard. The question is how to draw it within the confines of what the expected style that represents it without breaking that style. Yeah, but that's because we're at a point now where we all agree that that's a way anime can do it, and we don't hate it. We've solved the problem of retaining the style, but that can only have been done by there being enough art out there that we all agree that that's the solution. Whereas if someone's looking up and you just draw them looking up like a real person, no one has to agree that's correct. This is correct. It's always correct because it's a person. They exist. They're real. So if you draw them, you're accurate, and accurately, then you're vindicated in your artistic pursuit by accurately representing it, even if it looks weird. This is the danger of using anime as your only reference point, is that you're really limited in when you can be rewarded by drawing things in a way that comes as a consensus. The freerun looking up is a group choice, not a real actual solution. It's that everyone just agrees that that's okay, that's a good way to do it. It's not, and then it still looks like anime. It's not, this is the way to do it from a logical standpoint. So if you're going to like, so yeah, this is a lot to try to communicate. This is why I never communicate this on Blue Sky or Twitter, because people are like, no, they figured it out. It's like, not really. We just all agreed this is probably the best way to do it. And it looks okay, and we still accept that it is anime. But that's just because we all came together and said, okay, yeah, sure, that's how we'll do that now. And we all agree it's still anime. But those solutions could have been presented in the 90s or 80s, and people are like, wow, it looks like Western style. If someone had drawn the solutions people show, they're like, oh yeah, that looks good. And they've shown that to an audience from the 80s or 90s, they might be like, this just looks like Western comic books. It's not, the solution is a team effort, not just one artist figured it out. We've all just come to agree that it's okay to do it this way. I mean, there's artists out there who draw anime style who are a little more realistic than others that I think I wish Japan would like pick up on and use more of, because I think that I wish the style would go in that direction, because it's like a lot of it's solved. I think like the Akira guy did a good job of like presenting realistic ish but still anime. But yeah, like the problem with this, so every time I kind of draw an anime head, it's like, here's the problem. Okay, so here's the camera. No matter what you do and as much as you want to do it, okay, this is the head. The plane of the face always wants to tilt towards the camera. And I know it's wrong, and I can see how wrong it is. Like, I can feel how wrong it is. Like, I know that at this angle, this eye is hidden. And I know that nose comes out more. And I've studied enough that I know all these things. But this is what happens to the face, you know, when you're trying to draw it in a stylized way, is that it like bends, and you have to bend it or it stops looking right. So you're just kind of pumping in a bunch of bad habits into your system right off the bat. So like one of my biggest, I think one of the ugliest anime styles right now is Detective Conan, because the face creep has gotten really out of hand, and it's only gotten worse. Detective Conan, the facial features have grown to just occupy the whole face. So if you draw like a head, you draw a chin, okay, and you draw all this shit, it's like this now. Like, it's just, it eats up the whole, everything that has to do with the face. Like, it's like there's no room for the side of the head. Like, everything is like, this is I think is really why it's so ugly to me, is that, you know, the facial features on a real person is very small section of the head. Here's the head. You know, you could usually draw like pretty much a really small shape and then shove all the features in here, something like this. Okay, but Detective Conan wants to do this. Like, it wants to, like, you know, it's likely that, you know, it's like this on a real person, but Detective Conan is like this. Oh yeah, that's a good motorcycle on a motorcycle helmet face. Yeah, it's pretty bad, and it's like, I mean, I don't care. Ultimately, I don't watch the show, so I don't give a shit. But I think learning to like rope in the features. I think I haven't been doing this as much, and I probably should. I think learning to rope in the features like this is probably another good bet for animating. I'm going to try to start doing that again. I was doing it quite a lot before. And I think I should continue doing it because I think it really helps limit face creep. So you can see it actually, I can really see it here. I really feel like there was a lot of face creep here. So here's an example I was talking about how like there's like an issue with his head, and if I were to draw on it again, I might just reincorporate the issue. So I'm going to blend it. And instead of recycling the drawings that were there, I'm just going to push it where I really think it should be. And it's actually quite a lot easier. Whereas if I was just drawing at a low opacity, I might just go down the same paths. Same with this. I'm going to obliterate this. And then build that, you know, feature cage. Stay within that cage. And rebuild the face without relying on the original, you know, mistakes. But following all these rules takes out a lot of the fun, right? But I think doing the blur method really helps me feel less stiff. And kind of like breaks me out of the cage a little bit. All right, I'm going to wrap up.